The latest installment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Avengers Endgame, garnered enormous attention at the box office, but few elements of the film invited such a dramatic reaction as Thor's portrayal, perhaps the series' most controversial character development choice yet. Endgame's dealings with Thor's mental illness and addiction may be taken as insensitive, but what specifically are we to make of Thor's weight gain? And might it be that the pounds he's packed on are here to stay? What could a Fat Thor mean for Phase 4? To best answer these questions, we will need to take a deep dive into Thor's development over the first 3 phases and examine what got him here in the first place. Since its inception, the characters of the Marvel Cinematic Universe have seen a number of dramatic changes, but since Phase 1, few characters have seen such a radical metamorphosis as Thor has. Given the connection that Thor's new weight gain clearly has to his newly depressive mental state, it only makes sense that examining this physical change necessarily means taking stock of the mental and emotional developments that Thor has experienced thus far too. In the 2011 film, Thor, he's presented as the ultra-fit, heroic, beer-loving god of thunder, one of the most powerful of the Asgardians.
At least make it a challenge for me.
Thor possesses a kind of mythic heroism from the get-go, in stark contrast, pun intended, to some of his more cosmopolitan counterparts. Unlike most of his cohorts, he possesses no everyday identity. He is a superhero of mythic proportions on and off the clock. Given the huge machismo with which Thor is introduced, it makes sense his storyline throughout the first 3 phases has largely been a lesson in both humbling himself and learning to handle profound loss. Though he does at the very least manage to maintain his incredible physical form throughout much of the series.
Pretty cut.
For a superhero of such grandeur, there's almost nowhere to go but down. This first film has him calling on his daddy to save the day after he brashly upsets the fragile peace between the Asgardians and the Frost Giants. As punishment for reigniting this conflict, his father Odin forces Thor to abdicate his claim to the throne, strips him of his divine powers, and banishes him to Earth.
You're unworthy!
Though Odin and Thor make amends, they ultimately agree that Thor is not fit to rule. In the film, audiences are introduced from the get-go to the idea that Thor's story will see him foregoing his natural superpowers in favor of more relatable human connections. We next see Thor in the first installment of the Avengers. He will always have a blind spot when it comes to his brother, and he's unable to defend the world against him using his powers alone. He needs the help of the Avengers. Though he maintained his mythic strength, fans saw Thor further humanized by the close of Phase 1. This sense of being unable to transcend the bonds we have with our loved ones is likely all too relatable for fans, though his godlike physique is still decidedly not. In Thor: The Dark World, we see his character struggle further. With his beloved mother and his redeemed brother gone, Thor has had his first encounter with profound grief. Even a hero as macho, mythic, and physically strong as Thor is not immune to this humanizing emotional pain, mythic strength aside. Phase 2 closes out with the Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Is that the best you can do?
In one of the visions, which Thor is plagued by thanks to Wanda Maximoff, Thor sees one of the 6 Infinity Stones and becomes convinced of the need to return to Asgard to learn more about the forces he suspects are at play in shaping the recent events. Notably though, his physique is still none the worse for it. In Phase 3, otherwise known as Infinity and Beyond, or the big one to diehard fans, Thor was reintroduced to audiences with a vengeance. 2017's Thor Ragnarok is widely agreed to be one of the Marvel Universe's biggest critical and box office successes. Yet, the release of Avengers Endgame also marks the most dramatic failure Thor has yet to incur. He fails to prevent Thanos' execution of the snap.
What'd you do?
Leading to the disintegration of half of the universe's inhabitants, including his beloved Jane. Infinity War ended with him ripped as ever, but before long, the enormous weight of this guilt will prove too heavy for even his divine strength. This brings us to Avengers Endgame, in which we witness Thor's most dramatic and controversial transformation yet. The film kicks off with Thor and a group of Avengers confronting Thanos on the garden planet to which he's retired. When he reveals that he's destroyed the Infinity Stones so that they may never again be used, Thor takes his revenge, angrily decapitating him. When we next see Thor, 5 years later, the internal character development we followed in the God of Thunder since the beginning has been externalized. Fat, depressed, and sporting a new straggly beard, Thor has holed himself up in a shack in a small colony of surviving Asgardians. This chubbier, mopier Thor is begrudgingly convinced to join in the Avengers' quest to use time travel to regain the Infinity Stones and save the universe. On his time travel trip, Thor returns to Asgard and encounters his mother, a meeting that reignites his sense of purpose and returns Mjolnir to him. Though a time-traveling Thanos returns with an army to retrieve the stones, the Avengers ultimately defeat his forces, suffering huge losses in the process. In the aftermath of Thanos' defeat, Thor abdicates his throne for a second time in the series. He gives up his kingship of the small Asgardian colony in Norway over which he rules and names Valkyrie the new queen. Phase 3 closes out with Thor humbled yet again, deciding to join the Guardians of the Galaxy. So what are fans to make of Thor's physical transformation, and where might it suggest he's headed in Phase 4? As we examined in another video, his representation certainly attracted a lot of controversy. Many were upset to see the severe post-traumatic stress and depression that Thor is dealing with was played off for laughs, arguing that his portrayal trivializes mental illness and grief. Some specifically pointed to his weight gain as part of the problem. For instance, a number of critics and fans pointed out the many fat jokes other characters made at Thor's expense. Consider when Rocket Raccoon meets him and likens his dad bod to melting ice cream. Referring to his lightning powers, Thor at one point asks the others, "What do you think is coursing through my veins right now?"
What do you think is coursing through my veins? Cheese whiz?
To be sure, these jokes make a mockery of Fat Thor and fatness generally, but some might take these as more representative of these characters and their relationship more than anything else. Rhodey is known for the tart-tongued attitude he inherited from Tony Stark, and these nasty jokes are in perfect keeping with Rocket Raccoon's cynical character. Many were quick to point this out, and to come to the defense of Thor's huskier portrayal, arguing that a fat superhero is more than welcome in a world so oversaturated with the fittest of the fit. What's more is that both the writers of the films and Chris Hemsworth himself can be counted among the list of fans of Fat Thor. In an interview with Vulture, Avengers writer Christopher Marcus said, "We're all used to Chris Hemsworth, the, in effect, living god. But when he comes out with the prosthetic on, it wasn't so much, oh my god, what a silly fat man, it was, he kinda looks like me when I take my shirt off." Thor became human for the first time. He adds that he considers this version the ideal Thor. In a Variety magazine cover story, the actor revealed that Thor was originally meant to revert back to his godlike self partway through the Endgame script, but Hemsworth fought hard to preserve his dad bod throughout the entire film. He affectionately referred to himself as Lebowski Thor on set, a comparison that is hard not to see. If Hemsworth fought hard to keep his chubbier physique throughout Endgame, it's not hard to imagine that he'll continue to defend Fat Thor in Phase 4. What's more is that, in many ways, Thor's weight gain is in keeping with his character development over the first 3 phases of the MCU. Though he may not have gotten fat until Endgame, his story has largely been a lesson in profound loss and humility. As a hero of literally godlike proportions, it only makes sense that his character development would take this route. In many ways, Fat Thor is just a crystallized outward representation of the humbled and more relatable version of Thor that the series has been moving towards since we were introduced to him as the jovial, beer-loving god of thunder in Phase 1. What is important to note is that, ultimately, Thor has really lost none of his signature machismo by the end of Endgame. He is as confident as ever when he approaches Thanos in this final battle, dad bod and all. Thor has ultimately lost none of his assertive, ultra-masculine attitude, despite the softer physique he's taken on. In the final moments of Endgame, fans watched Thor threaten to take lead of the Guardians of the Galaxy, much to Star-Lord's annoyance. Thor's brash ambition in these final moments mirrors both Star-Lord's own brand of headstrong masculinity and carries the brazen machismo in which the God of Thunder was first introduced into the present. Moreover, Thor's acceptance into the Guardians team suggests that he's taking on a bit more of a misfit role, in sharp contrast to the mythically heroic portrayal he gets in Phase 1. It only makes sense that Thor, who has at various times been exiled, had his powers stripped, and lost most of his loved ones, would shack up with the ragtag group that is the Guardians of the Galaxy. All of his closest cohorts are now ex-con outcasts, and it's not hard to see how, in Phase 4, this fatter version of Thor would fit in better with them than his earlier, mythically macho self. In the end, Thor takes his mother Frigga's advice that the true measure of a person is how they succeed at being who they are. Though chubbier than he ever has been, Thor is also as confident as ever. This is who he is. At least for now. We're curious what fellow fans of the MCU have to say about Fat Thor. Were you a fan of the God of Thunder's weight gain in Endgame? Let us know in the comments. And while we wait for Thor's return in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, be sure to subscribe to ScreenRant to stay up to date on the latest Marvel Universe movies and theories as to what's gonna come next.